Hello, I'm Shane M. Nygaard, and welcome to the seventh house at sunset, reflections on the setting sun, where the day turns toward its other. This is part of my From Sunrise Through Nightfall exploration of the 12 houses of the Zodiac. There is an hour in the day when the world becomes uncertain in a beautiful way. The sun has not yet disappeared, but its departure is unmistakable. The sky deepens, gold turns amber, amber turns rose, rose begins to darken toward violet. Shadows lengthen, forms blur. What seemed clear only an hour before begins to appear less certain. This is the light of the seventh house. If the ascendant is sunrise and the houses unfold as a 24-hour circle through the course of a day, then the seventh house belongs to sunset. It is the western gate, the place where the sun leans into disappearance, where day meets its opposite, and where the visible world begins to surrender itself to mystery. And what better image could there be for the house of relationship, partnership, marriage, open enemies, lawsuits, and the other? The seventh house is not simply the place where we meet another person. It is the place where we meet what is not ourselves. It is the western horizon of consciousness, we could say. The point opposite the ascendant, the place where the self encounters the other, and where the ego begins to learn that reality cannot be organized only around its own center. At sunset, the world is still visible, but not entirely knowable. The same is true of relationship. Another person may stand before us. We may see their face, hear their voice, know their habits, live beside them, even love them deeply, and still some part of them remains unknown. The seventh house teaches that encounter begins where certainty begins to soften. In traditional astrology, the seventh house is the place of marriage, partnership, alliance, contract, legal conflict, and open enemies. At first, these themes may seem scattered: marriage and lawsuits, lovers and rivals, vows and disputes. But symbolically, they belong to the same field. The seventh house governs whatever stands across from us with force, with significance, and with consequence. It is the place of direct encounter, the place where another will, another desire, another reality meets our own. And this is why the other cannot be reduced to comfort alone. The other may enchant us. The other may challenge us. The other may complete something in us or confront something in us. But the other is never simply ours to possess. We could say the other is horizon. In my book, Jung's instruction to stick with the image remains one of the deepest guides for astrological thinking. Astrology is not only a system of concepts, it is a world of forms, scenes, symbols, and living pictures. Jung also said that image is psyche, and psyche, from the Greek, is soul. So to remain with the image is not to drift away from reality, it is to enter the soul's proper mode of knowing. And so for the seventh house, we remain with sunset. We do not rush too quickly into keywords. We do not reduce the house to marriage or relationship alone. We look at the light. We look at the horizon. We look at the hour itself. And sunset begins to teach. Sunset has always stirred the imagination. Lots of images to stick with. It is the light of lovers and elegies, of endings and thresholds, of beauty so intense it already carries loss within it. It is the hour when cowboys ride into the distance at the end of old westerns, disappearing into myth. It is the golden hour of photographers, the beloved hour of poets, the atmosphere of wistfulness, romance, and reverie. And yet, sunset is also about approach. It is the nearness of night, and night has long been imagined as the hour of demons, witches, banshees, spirits, hidden things, and all that daylight does not wish to see. Sunset is both tenderness and unease, both wonder and the awakening of shadow. And this doubleness makes it profoundly seventh house. There's a beautiful remark from Norwegian opera singer Lisa Davidsen about Richard Strauss's Im Abendrot, or At Sunset, that opens the image even further. The aria is not simply about change itself. It's about what comes after the change, when one looks out into the horizon and wonders, what is there? What is going on there? This is a haunting question, and it is unmistakably seventh house. For is this not also the question of relationship? What is there in the one before me? What is going on there between appearance and depth, between what is said and what is silently lived, between what I know and what I imagine? The seventh house brings us to the edge of what we cannot fully master. The Western light tells the truth of relationship in a visual way. Anything standing before sunset becomes backlit. It darkens. It turns to silhouette. We see shape, contour, posture, gesture, but not interiority. And so we often imagine into it. We fill the darkened figure with our hopes, our fears and longings, our suspicions and memories and fantasies. Sunset is one of projection's favored lights. This is one of the great psychological truths of the seventh house. The other is never perceived in noon-like clarity. We do not simply see them as they are. We see them through atmosphere, through desire, through fear, through longing, through the stories our own psyche needs to tell. The seventh house is therefore a place not only of romance, but of confusion. Not only intimacy, but awkwardness. Not only projection, but misperception. The human comedy of relationship belongs here as much as its lyric beauty. How often we are not how often we are not merely responding to what another person said, but to what we imagined they meant, or what we feared they saw, or what we hoped they wanted, or what we believed they failed to understand. Sunset really thickens this. It adds atmosphere. It makes certainty harder to sustain. But this is not only a problem, it is also a doorway. Because where the eye sees less, the psyche begins to see more. It is not accidental that in older traditions, the seventh house was sometimes associated with death. At first, this may seem startling. How did the house of marriage become at times the house of death? But if we remain with the image, the association begins to make symbolic sense. Sunset is the day's dying. It is the visible life of the sun passing toward its end. The great light that has ordered the world now lowers itself toward disappearance. This does not mean the seventh house is reducible to mortality. It means that sunset carries the imaginal atmosphere through which mortality can begin to be understood. The seventh house is not only the bond with another person, it is also the bond with finitude, passage, vulnerability, and time. Even romance in the seventh house is touched with elegy. Even beauty comes shadowed by impermanence. That is part of why sunset is so moving. It is gorgeous precisely because it does not stay. The seventh house teaches that all encounters occur under the condition of time. One meets the other, and thereby meets change. One loves, and thereby encounters vulnerability. One joins, and thereby risks rupture. This is not a flaw in relationship, it is part of its sacred structure. To love anything or anyone is to enter a world where beauty is real, but not fixed, where connection matters because it can change, where the light is precious because it is passing. Anything standing between us and the setting sun becomes shadow, and there is wisdom in these shadows. One arresting image says that shadows are best around 5 in the afternoon, fully awake. That line feels made for the seventh house. Morning shadows are faint and sleepy, but evening shadows are articulate. They say more. They reveal more, not because they are clearer in a literal sense, but because they are more charged and more expressive, more alive with psychic content. The fully awake shadows of sunset are not merely the absence of light. They are the animation of what daylight could not fully disclose. This is why the seventh house can be so fertile for art, drama, relationship, and imagination. So let's look at a couple of chart examples here. J.K. Rowling offers a vivid example of sunset lit imagination. With a particularly concentrated seventh house, her work seems almost destined to unfold in a realm where shadows are fully awake. The world of Harry Potter is saturated with seventh house atmosphere, twilight corridors, hidden motives, divided loyalties, mysterious others, dark doubles, soul stealing shadows, and the constant confrontation between innocence and shadow. Harry does not simply live in a magical world. He lives in a world where darkness has contour, personality, and will. And perhaps most strikingly, Rowling drew on her own experiences of depression to create the Dementors. those terrible beings who drain joy, hope, and soul from the human field. They are not abstract monsters, they are shadow made animate. B.B. King reveals another register of the seventh house, not fantasy darkness, but emotional dusk. The blues belongs to sunset, not because sunset is only sadness, but because it carries the tones of complexity, melancholy, longing, memory, tenderness, loneliness, endurance, and feeling too deep for clear daylight categories. B.B. King's life bore real sorrows, poverty, grief, racial violence, loneliness, labor, fear. Yet when he spoke of the blues, he resisted any flattening of them into tragedy alone. The blues were not simply despair, they were hope, excitement, pure emotion. They brought out feeling. And this, too, is profoundly seventh house. Sunset is never one color. The blues are never one feeling. The heart at dusk is never one thing. In Dylan Thomas, we meet the seventh house in its elegiac and defiant form. Sorry, elegiac form, or elegiac and defiant form. That word always stumps me. Do not go gentle into that good night is one of the great Western lines of resistance to decline, disappearance, and death. It is impossible not to hear it in the setting sun, whether literal sunset or the sunset of life. Thomas speaks from that western edge where day and death begin to rhyme. The poem burns with refusal, but it also burns because it knows what is coming. Without the nearness of night, there would be no urgency, no blaze, no plea. This too belongs to the seventh house, the place where beauty, relationship, language, and life itself becomes more intense because they are passing. So, what does the seventh house finally teach through the image of sunset? It teaches that encounter is beautiful and perilous, that the other is necessary and unknowable, that relationship is not the abolition of mystery, but its habitation. It teaches that projection belongs to love and fear alike, that shadows wake as the light descends, that romance and secrecy may occupy the same horizon, that conflict and partnership are governed by the same field of meeting. Above all, the seventh house teaches that life becomes more imaginal, not less, when we leave the stark certainties of noon. At sunset, we begin to see by another faculty, not by possession, but by wonder, not by mastery, but by relation, not by total clarity, but by attunement to color, contour, mood, and threshold. Sunset does not merely end the day, it reveals what daylight could not show.